Hello there everyone, it's Nina. Thanks for joining me today for a new video as I'm going to be sharing 3 different ways I use Tim Holtz' new Distress color, Lumberjack Plaid. I'll be using many of the new Distress color products today to create 3 different backgrounds using the same stencil. The stencil that I'm going to be using today is from Simon's Stamp, and it's the Christmas Foliage stencil. It's actually one I designed for Simon last year, and I loved using it so much last year I wanted to use it again. So that's what we're going to be using today. On my desk, I have all of the new Distress Color products from the new Lumberjack Plaid collection. As you can see, there's a really great red here. It's perfect for Christmas and, of course, year-round. The first technique I'm going to share is with the Distress paint. So I'm going to shake up the Distress paint and start applying it onto a piece of plastic just so that way I can work with it. I've got Lumberjack Plaid, Rustic Wilderness, and also Salvaged Patina. My plan is to apply this paint through the stencil, and to do so I'm going to use a ink blending tool with a foam applicator on top. I have one for each color so I don't contaminate the colors as I apply them through the stencil layers. The Christmas Foliage stencil is a layering stencil set. It's a 4x9 stencil. Works great for covering card panels that are going to be nested onto your A2 card, so it makes a nice panel that's a little bit smaller than your card, which gives it a nice border. I'm going to use Simon's Stamp very low tack tape to apply each layer of the stencil onto my cardstock. The cardstock I'm using is Simon 120 pound white. I'm going to start taking the Distress paint and I want to dab it around and kind of get it moving across my foam applicator before bringing it onto my stencil. Then I'm going to start working in a dabbing motion and apply the paint through the stencil. I don't recommend dragging your paint through the stencil. I think the up and down motion is the most cleanest way to apply this paint, because if you start dragging it, the wet paint might seep under the edges of the stencil. So we have this really cool red layer that looks super neat, and now we're going to take the second layer. This one has some leaves and pine branches. I use Salvage Patina for that layer, and then finally the other leafy layer is going to be done with the Rustic Wilderness. After applying all of your paint, you can then clean your foam applicators and get them all free of all that paint and reuse them. So it's a good way to stretch your product. We're then going to remove this last stencil and let this dry, and we're going to then add a bit of ink blending on top. So I waited about 10 to 15 minutes to let this dry, and I'm going to start bringing in an ink blending tool from Simon's Stamp and also some Speckled Egg Distress ink. I'm using that just to apply a little bit of color around the edges. I wanted to get a little bit more of a distressed feel, and I really like how that adds a nice cool soft tone to this background. With a bit of water, I splattered on top of this background just to get some splatters on the ink itself, and I'll dab that up with a paper towel. This background needs a little bit of spray in my opinion. I like the distressed look, so I'm going to use some Oxide spray. And with that Lumberjack Plaid color, I'm just going to spritz it on top of some of the corners of this paper. So this adds a nice speckled appearance and it really adds to the distressing. For a bit of bling, because it is the holidays, I brought in a spray stain from Tim Holtz that was one of the metallic ones. This one is more of a brassy color and I really like how that paired up with the red tones. I just splattered that with the end of the tool, and then I cut this down into a tag shape. This tag shape is from Simon's Stamp. It is a really nice nested tag set from CZ Design and Simon, and I die cut not only that paper that we made, but also a piece of glitter cardstock, and we're going to layer these together to form a really nice layered tag. With a bit of twine, I'm going to put this through the hole of both of the tags, so this way they will be connected and it makes a nice layered effect. I'm not going to decorate the glittered part of the tag, that's just more of an accent to go with the rest of the tag. With Tim's bold text Christmas die set, I'm going to cut the word joy from some Simon's Stamp rose gold paper, and I'm going to pop the letters up onto the tag. Now I originally had thought I was going to spell out the whole word joy, but then I decided to take the O off, and I'm going to replace it with a snowflake die. The snowflake is from Tim Holtz's Fanciful Snowflakes collection. I die cut it from some white glitter cardstock, and I'm going to glue it down onto my tag with some liquid glue. To layer things up a bit more, I also pulled in the Bliss Snowflake die from Simon's Stamp, and I'm going to layer that on top of the Fanciful Snowflake. So this creates a super dimensional snowflake that fills in the letter O for the word joy and provides a really nice decorative element. In the center of the snowflake, I'm going to add one of Tim's little half pearls. This one is from the Christmas mix. It has red, green, blue, and also creamy white colors. And I really like how that added a nice little finishing touch to the tag. So this tag would be perfect for the holidays on your gifts or baked goods. A great way to be able to add a nice decorative element onto your gifts this holiday season. But don't forget that you could also turn this into a card. If you didn't cut it down into a tag shape, you could have totally put this as a panel on top of an A2 card. All right, let's move on to technique number 2. I'm going to use that same Christmas foliage stencil set, but this time I'm using the layer that has all of the elements combined into one. I'm taping that stencil onto a piece of white cardstock, and then I'm going to apply some Tim Holtz texture paste through that stencil. I want to cover this entire background with that paste and then smooth it out with a stencil pal. This will make sure that I get the paste cleanly applied and evenly applied across the entire piece. So I'll just go over it a couple times to make sure I don't have any air bubbles, and then we'll remove the stencil and make sure you clean your stencil after removing. That paste will dry pretty quickly. While the paste is still wet, I'm applying some embossing glaze on top of the stenciled design. I'm using not only the Lumberjack Plaid color, but I also pulled in some Rustic Wilderness and also some Speckled Egg and Uncharted Mariner. These colors are really pretty together, and I just tapped off all the excess once I applied all of the powder. These are going to blend together and create some new colors. It's going to look really, really pretty. I applied some heat to get that embossing glaze to melt, and these are going to create a really beautiful glossy finish on our stencil design. Once the glaze has cooled, I then brought in both Lumberjack Plaid and also Rustic Wilderness Distress inks. I'm using these inks to create a background. And because we used embossing glaze for this embossed design, it's going to resist the ink. So you're just going to make sure you buff off any extra ink after doing all of your blending. This is creating a really neat textured look too. I also applied some water splatters, and because I applied the water splatters in between the red and green ink applications, it gave the background two different looks. So the splatters on top of the red are lightened and the ones down on the green are darker. So it creates a new effect. Just because I love splatters and adding a little bit more distressing, I did bring in some spray stains in both that brass color and also the Lumberjack Plaid spray stain and created a really nice splattered effect. Here's how that glaze looks once everything is dry. I just love it. It really adds a nice bit of gloss and dimension to your background. To finish off this card, I brought in the Peace, Love, Hope, and Joy die from Simon Says Stamp. I stacked 2 pieces of white cardstock together, and then I finally used a layer of rose gold on top of that. To continue that rose gold theme in this card, I'm going to mat my background on top of the rose gold cardstock. I'm leaving a very thin border around the edges, and that way I'll have a nice finish around this card that both mats it and also matches the sentiment. Now, if you want to try to save your rose gold cardstock, you could have totally cut out the center portion. I didn't bother doing so for this card, but you can do that if you choose to. I'm putting this on top of a Simon Says Stamp top folding card base in white, and that's going to really add some nice brightness to this background. The sentiment was glued right into the center of the card with some liquid glue, and then I embellished everything with a few of these beautiful half pearls from Tim Holtz. These are both gold and silver, and I thought that the mix of metals between rose gold, gold, and also silver was a perfect combination for the holidays. This card has so much gloss and dimension, super shiny and perfect for the holidays. Finally, let's move on to project number 3. So I have that same Christmas foliage stencil set, and this time we're going to use the layers, and we're going to do some simple ink blending. Nothing crazy here. I'm going to tape this down as I've done with everything with very, very low tack tape. And then I'm going to use Oxide inks for all of my ink blending. So with Simon Says Stamp blending brushes, I'm just applying the Oxide ink through each of the layers of the Christmas foliage stencil set. So for this layer, I used red, of course the Lumberjack Plaid. Then for layer number 2 of those green leaves, I brought in that Rustic Wilderness color. These are a perfect color combination for the holidays. Rustic Wilderness and Lumberjack Plaid. I just love how they pair together. And then finally, I'm going to bring in Salvage Patina, a nice bright teal, to add to that 3rd layer. So now we're going to end up with this festive background that looks absolutely beautiful. You could turn this into a card. I decided to soften things up by bringing in Speckled Egg Distress ink, not Oxide. I wanted the ink here. And I loved how the Oxide ink and the Distress ink reacted together and started to blend and create some nice colors in between. So I liked how that worked. I'm going to bring in some terrific adhesive sheets. We're going to do something super fun here. I'm going to cut this adhesive sheet down to an A2 size card panel, which is what I've got here. I'm going to remove the release paper from one side of this adhesive sheet, and I'm going to lay this straight down on top of all of our ink blending. Once I have applied this down, I'm going to press it really well and then remove the other side of the release paper. So now this panel is covered with adhesive. With Tim Holtz Distress Clear Rock Candy Glitter, we're going to cover this entire adhesive sheet with that glitter. This is where the magic happens. So we're going to shake off the excess and do the exact same thing to the other side of the panel. And this is covering this paper and making it our very own custom glitter paper that has a pattern. I always like to make sure that I burnish that glitter into the adhesive really well by just taking my fingers and pressing it in, rubbing it around, and then tapping off any excess. And the adhesive sheets hold that glitter really well. Basically, none of the glitter is going to come off. You might get a stray piece here and there, but for the most part, this is a no-shed technique, which I love. I want to embellish this card with some foiling. So I brought in a Simon Says Stamp Sentiment Strip Pack. This is one of their Christmas ones. And I'm just going to stick this inside of a carrier sheet from ThermoWeb with some Gina K Designs Deco Foil. I'm going to put this into my mini Mink. It's set on setting number 3. And we're going to foil that red foil on top of the sentiment strip and get a gorgeous greeting that's going to look perfect on top of that card. I always love the magic of revealing the sentiment once you take off the excess foil. And then I'll just trim the sentiment down a little bit so that way it has a nice framing around it. That way the border matches around all 4 sides. I'm putting this background panel, the glitter one that we created, on top of some silver cardstock from Simon Says Stamp. This is the matte silver color. And I'm just going to trim this down so it has a very thin border around it. Again, like I said with the rose gold, you could cut out the middle portion of that paper and save that, but I didn't for this project. I popped this up on top of an A2 card, and then I brought in a silver die cut snowflake that I made from Simon's Lee Snowflake die set. And I'll just glue that right into the center of my card. This is the same silver cardstock that I used for the mat. And then that beautiful foiled sentiment went right on top, and that finished off this card. Super simple, but so much shine and glitter from the glitter paper that we made to the foiled sentiment on top and all the silver accents. This card is absolutely stunning. So I hope that these 3 ideas were a fun way of showing you how you can use the different distress products with one stencil set and create very unique backgrounds that are completely different. I encourage you to look in your stash and see what kind of products you have that you could use to create these same effects. Basically, you can take the same techniques that I used for all of these projects and recreate them even with different products. So have fun, try some things out. I hope you enjoy. I'd also be curious to know which project was your absolute favorite. Which technique did you like most? So let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you were inspired, and I can't wait to come back and share more with you. Until then, I hope you have a fabulous day, and thanks for watching.